On the occasion of Baba Saheb's Jayanti, I greet you all from Nagpur, India, and it has been a great opportunity for me to talk to you about some of the ideas that the organizers have asked me to talk to you about. It's about the identities and how do we navigate through the jungle of identities that we find ourselves into. So to begin with, I will go back to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar himself as to how he conceptualized the various identities. There is a very interesting event that took place in the Columbia University when Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar went there as a young man to study for his MA. And he was not very keen to stay in New York because he found the atmosphere very dull. He didn't like the food and he wanted to come back to India. But an incident took place where Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar fully decided to stay back. And that incident was like this. There was a great sociologist, Giddings, Professor Giddings, who formulated an identity, an idea called the consciousness of a kind. And he was relating that idea in a classroom. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was struck by that idea so much that he thought there in the class that come what may, he is not going to leave the university or New York till he drinks deep into the knowledge that has been imparted in the university. And the idea of the consciousness of a kind comes in Babasaheb Ambedkar's writings and speeches because that idea has struck him so much. And this particular incident is about the identity as to how we have the consciousness of a kind. So every species has, this consciousness of a kind. And as a human being, when we look at the other human beings, we have this consciousness of a kind. But we also know that the human beings get locked in certain narrow identities, like the consciousness of a caste, the term used by Babasaheb Ambedkar. So at the outset, we will follow the footsteps of Babasaheb Ambedkar in understanding that our basic identity cannot be confined to any caste, it cannot be confined to any gender, it cannot be confined to any class, it cannot be confined to anything, because as an individual, we have the unlimited capacity to be what we can be or what we can potentially be. So to follow on from Babasaheb's own ideas, he, of course, when he came back to India, he has to dabble with a lot of identities. And his foray into the world of identities was to empower the people, to bring them out of their common suffering, to organize them. And we can see that his conceptualization of the identities was directed at organizing the people, because the people were disorganized, the people were unorganized, and the disorganization was such that it led to the conflict in the society. Even among the so-called untouchables, there were many subcastes and they were posed against each other. So the first thing that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar initiated was a project of constructing an identity which will bring the disparate, diverging groups together. And we have seen that his scholarship was directed at understanding the phenomenon of untouchability, the system of caste. And in 1935, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar came up with this very interesting idea that so long as the labels of the caste remain, the caste system will remain. So he was very, very mindful of the consequences of the various identities that were prevalent in the society. And as the scholarship is now bringing to us, that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was consciously creating the identity of who is an untouchable, historically, politically, socially, culturally. And this project of organizing the untouchables, who were already divided into, as we know today, 800 caste and different linguistic groups and different religious groups. As we know that in the northern India, we have the identities based on religions like Raidasis or Kabir Panthis, and so many Satnamis, And if we go south, there are a lot of these conundrums of identities based on the religious paths. And when the process of census took place, there were also many identities in play, in opposition to the identity of Hindu that was being imposed on our people during the census process. So the people in Punjab, under the leadership of Manguram, came up with this idea of Adi Hindus, and in the Telugu speaking region there was an identity of Adi Andhra, and in Tamil Nadu there was an identity of Adi Dravida. Our people claimed there that they were before the Dravidians. So we know that there are these lot of identities, but in the best Ambedkarite tradition or a project, we have to see that how these identities can empower the people, organize the people, and educate the people as to who they are. And in the beginning, we have had the identity of the voiceless people, and a lot of people were trying to take our agencies and represent us, and claiming different identities for us. One of the identities that was being imposed on us politically by the Congress and the Gandhi was that of the Harijans, and that was their project to keep the untouchables in the Congress fold. And we see that there are so many identities prevalent in the societies, and we are so much attached to the identities that we cannot escape from the pull of these identities. And therefore it is very important to realize at the outset that the identities are just a means to a certain end, and we use the different identities whenever we need, but we don't attach to that. And one of the things that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar had realized, that the human mind cannot be confined to the identities. It's potentially limitless, and if we dig deep into our experiences, we cannot find these identities. They are just words or the labels that are there in circulation, and they co-arise in the context of the language, in the context of the culture, and in the case of caste system, it arises in the context of the Brahminical social order. So as Babasaheb Ambedkar has taught us, that the individuals become very abstract if we don't think of the individuals in terms of the society or their relationship with other human beings or other ideas and the world. And therefore these identities are very dynamic. And as the Buddha said, that so long as we identify with any identity, we are going to suffer. And that was his discovery, that when we go deep into our experiences, we cannot find any atta or any identity. And in the Buddhist conception of the things, the identity formation is not there till we are 3 years old, and then the social linguistic forces come into being, and our identity get formed and forged. So therefore we cannot cling to any identity, but we have to learn to use the different identities to mobilize the people, to bring them together, to create a community of the people, and that is only possible through creation of the identity. So let us look at the identity of untouchable, which Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has made efforts to give it a kind of a historical dimension and cultural and social dimension. And we know that this conceptualization was so important that it culminated into the formation of the ideas like the All India Scheduled Caste Federation. Of course, the scheduled caste is an official term which came into being in 1935. But then we have the identity that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has marked on, that is the identity of the Republican, when he constituted the Republican Party of India, and the identity of Indian, which transcends the narrow confines of the caste, class, gender, and all that divides the human beings. And then we have seen, as with the advent of the bomb safe movement, we have seen the identity of a Bahujan coming into fore, which includes the scheduled caste, the OBCs, and the converted minorities. And to go further from that, we have today what is called the Mool Nivasi identity. So we all have these conundrums of identities, many identities, and how we navigate through them depends on the context. For example, the word Dalit is very despised word by some of the followers of Babasaheb Ambedkar. But if you look at the history of the Dalit world, word, it has its own way of mobilizing the people. For example, the way the Dalit Panthers or the Dalit scholars, that movement emerged from Millen College, has defined the word Dalit as all the oppressed people in the world who are seeking justice, isn't it? So, this identity can be used in the context of organizing the people when the atrocities are committed on them. So different identities have a different function. But what I'm going to do is going to look at the last identity that Dr. Baba Ambedkar has given to us, and that identity is the identity of a Nava. And in the Prabuddha Bharat, there are many articles in 1956 which talks about Nava, new. So I think this concept of new is very important for us to recognize and understand that we are always new. We are not our old selves. And so long as we confine ourselves with our old selves, we are going to suffer. And therefore, we have to look at our existence in terms of the dynamic terms, in terms of evolving societies and the evolving people, and going forward towards becoming enlightened Prabuddha. And I think this identity is very important because it is not just a label, or it's not just a noun, because Nava has a connotation of new, fresh, always, moving ahead, always moving forward, not confined to anything that strikes us down to the narrow existence. And I think this identity of a Nava, or new, or fresh, or ever growing, is so important that it gives us a vantage point from which we can look at all the different identities, and we can use different identities to organize the people, to mobilize the people, to create the power among the people. And some of the identities, I think the identities of the subcaste, have to be altogether done away with. The idea of a caste like the Chamar, Mahar, or Paraya, or Matang, they have to be done away with. And we have to gradually accept the identity of a common history. Maybe we can call it a scheduled caste. In terms of referring to the exploitation, we can use the word Dalit, or whatever words that we use. Politically, to organize the people, we have got this very beautiful word Bahujan, through which we can organize the people against the minority exploiters. And the idea of Republican, the idea of being a Democrat, a social democrat, there are many good ideas, identities that Baba Ambedkar has given to us. And whatever we identify with us, we tend to become that, because according to the scheme of Baba Ambedkar, the individual is not abstract. We are the society concentrated. So we have to very carefully choose what identity we take on to ourselves. And I think the solution has been already given by Baba Ambedkar when he gave us this beautiful word, the new way, the newness, the freshness. And I think Nava is the perspective from which we should look at everything with a fresh eyes, with a fresh mind, with a fresh thinking, to see how we can use different identity to further the welfare of the communities. So I think these are very complex topics, very emotive. It raises a lot of emotions, but unless we tend to let go of certain identities, or all the identities, we cannot embrace our true humanity as to who we are. Deep inside, deep down us, we are all enlightened beings, or capable to be the Buddha himself, or Baba Sahib himself. So thank you so much for inviting me for this beautiful occasion. I again greet you on this AO, and thank you so much.